Welcome to all of those joining. We will begin shortly, just giving a moment to folks to be able to sign on. Hello, everyone, and welcome. Thank you for joining us today for ARPIC's Lunch and Learn, entitled Advancing GHG Emissions Reduction Objectives by Targeting Energy Losses. My name is Danny Gruner, and I will be your host for today. I'm the Western Regional Service Line Leader for Real Property Management Services at Defence Construction Canada. I'm also a long-standing volunteer with ARPIC and have been involved with planning and the delivery of many previous workshops and webinars. As I'm hosting this webinar today from Edmonton, I would like to begin by acknowledging that we are meeting on Treaty 6 territory, traditional lands of First Nations, Métis, Inuit, and all First Peoples of Canada. And I invite you to take a moment to reflect on where you are today as you're listening in to this webinar today. The Real Property Institute of Canada, ARPIC, is an organization with the primary goal of developing and fostering a high professional standard of real property management within the federal public sector, and to provide a forum for information exchange and continuous improvement. ARPIC provides a forum for networking, opportunities to seek expert advice, and as we are doing here today, providing training and career development through workshop training, sessions, and seminars. Our professional development programming would not be possible without the support of our generous sponsors. Thank you to our annual sponsors, our public sector sustaining partner, PSPC, our private sector sustaining partners, Colliers Project Leaders, Tyree, Facility Solutions, and Horizont Inc., and our private sector supporting partners, AECOM and the Canada Lands Company. Today's webinar is brought to you by QTech. Before we begin the presentation, I want to briefly go over a few housekeeping notes with you. The session is being recorded and a playback link will be sent to the email that you provided to register for this webinar. The recording will also be posted on the ARPIC website following the webinar. For the live Q&As, please use the question button in the bottom center of your video screen to submit your questions to the presenters. And if any point throughout the webinar you're experiencing technical difficulties, please use the chat function and message tech support, and somebody there will be able to assist you. Our participant list will also be shared to enable continued conversation. However, if you would like to have your name removed prior to the list being distributed, please contact us by email at admin@arpic-ibic.ca. That is ADMIN@rpic-ibic.ca. We're going to begin with a quick poll. We thank you for joining us today, but we would like to get a sense on where you're all joining us from and what your preferred language is. So please take a moment to complete the poll that you should be seeing up on your screen now. If we could maybe see the results of that poll coming up. So we have a strong English preference. We have some folks tuning in from Alberta today. We have representation from British Columbia and Manitoba. A few folks from Nova Scotia, Quebec, Saskatchewan, and I think we have some folks from outside of Canada too. So great, welcome to all of you. I will now pass it over to our moderator, Catherine. She's the VP of Programming with ARPIC to moderate this session and introduce our great speakers today. So Catherine recently transitioned her consulting career to the federal service, and she is acting director for the innovative delivery strategies at PSPC. Over to you, Catherine.
Excellent. Merci beaucoup, Dani. A few words in French. Juste au cas, donc avant de débuter ma présentation, je vais être certaine que les gens peuvent bien interagir avec nous sur la plateforme. Donc, s'il y a des questions, veuillez utiliser la fonction de questions-réponses en bas de l'écran. Tel que mentionné, l'événement est enregistré et sera disponible sur le site web de l'IBIC dans les jours à venir. Donc, commençons sans plus tarder. Alors, the presenters for today are Pavan Melati and Thierry Lemieux. Pavan is the CEO of Keytech. He's an entrepreneur whose expertise includes really in-depth knowledge of major vertical industries with the focus on clean tech and renewable energy, which is perfect for this conversation where we want to help deepen understanding of energy efficiency initiatives that are possible in real property. He's an experienced leader in this in the startup process, from an initial idea to launch, can help clients set priorities and develop strategy, build teams to really successfully execute on client engagements. Thierry Lemieux, lui, il est un ingénieur mécanique avec plus de 20 ans d'expérience dans le secteur des biens immobiliers. Récemment, il s'est joint à la division des services immobiliers de la SPAC afin de contribuer à la mise en œuvre de la stratégie pour un gouvernement vert du gouvernement du Canada. In this role, Thierry will support PSPC activities, other federal department activities, as well as federal level initiatives, ensuring alignment with the Government of Canada's greening targets. Prior to joining PSPC, Thierry advanced the creation and the implementation of Natural Resource Canada's greenhouse gas reduction program, as well as the implementation of national greening and government operations, workforce to support other federal departments and their efforts to reduce greenhouse gas emissions. Wanted to share with you the goals for this session today, really, because we're at ARPIC really focused on professional development. The goal set for this is really to help you get visibility and understand how advanced data collection approaches can be used to help support energy efficiency projects, but also want you to better understand also the greening of government strategy and know where to find more information about it. So hoping that through this you can, one, know where to understand what the expectations are with respect to greening, but also get an idea in terms of how you can help achieve those targets when it comes to the real property that you manage. Now, we'd love to maybe put up this poll that we thought of for this event, where we want to get a sense of your understanding of the greening of government strategy. Let's take a second just to kind of see where everyone's knowledge is right now. And don't you worry, we won't be verifying who has read it and who has not read it. Just want to get a sense of the room, really. And this will help Thierry and us in this dialogue with you. I think this is good. Let's see what the results are. We're kind of doing this in fast time. Perfect. A lot of individuals have read it. Very good. The majority have. But when it comes to familiarity, fair enough, some folks that will have a smaller group will have maybe a deeper understanding of it. Majority have, let's say, a intermediate level of understanding, let's call it, and others have not been able to really dissect it. So you know what? This session is here for that. Thierry will be, in his discussion, really helping us navigate the strategy and really kind of drive us in terms of how we can find more information within what's currently published about the strategy. Really, Thierry, over to you.
All right. Thank you, Catherine. I hope you can hear me well now. I'm just going to share my screen. So first, I want to thank you for giving me this opportunity to speak at today's event. I really appreciate that. So I figured I would give a quick overview of the key outstanding elements from the greening government strategy. Obviously, going through in detail would probably take an hour and a half. So in order to keep this short, I just want to pinpoint the real key elements there. So I'm on Treasury Board Secretariat webpage, in which the green government strategy is published. So you're all pretty aware it resulted from the COP21 Paris in 2015, from which various documents and strategy piece and components were issued. So the strategy has been in place for a couple of years already, and really what's important for the community, the federal community, is to understand that there are really four key focus areas. So we're looking at as for federal operations. So looking up at the mobility and fleet, climate resilient operations, procurements of goods and services, and not the least, real property activities. I guess for today's discussion, it's where we'll spend most of the focus. So I just want to walk you through a couple of the key elements within the strategy. And saying that, I just want to also acknowledge that the strategy was updated in the fall of 2020. And I would say that the three main components that we saw evolve or change with that iteration was that the federal government is now committed to achieve net zero carbon emissions by 2050, which is basically a game changer. In the past, it was already a stringent target or commitment, but now there's no doubt we will go to net zero emissions. So it's in all of our actions in the four key category or focus area. It'll be important to keep that in mind. Another aspect of the changes that we saw was the expansion of scope of reporting emissions. We're now including national safety and security fleets in the reporting. We're also looking up at embodied carbon and integrating also scope 3 emissions, which are there for employee commuting and air travel. Now I just want to go through real property. And like I said, I can't go in very detail. We don't have time for that, but a couple of the key elements that's really important to acknowledge. All new federal buildings, so new constructions, will be net zero carbon. Okay, so no more trying to achieve. By default, new construction needs to be net zero carbon, unless a life cycle cost analysis indicates that it's better or it's not possible to get to carbon neutral, and it's better to go to net zero carbon ready construction. So that's a game changer. Also for all major building retrofit, now there'll be the requirement to use the life cycle cost analysis approach over a 40-year period, and with the integration of a shadow carbon pricing of $300 a ton. That's going to be applied to the measures and opportunities assessment in order to foster low carbon solutions. That's really a game changer, we think, because it'll be way more difficult from now on to implement solutions that are carbon based. It'll really foster and help the low carbon and no carbon solutions to be implemented. On top of that, I just want to go a bit lower in the strategy. In terms of low carbon operations, that's another major driver. The federal government will be using 100% clean electricity by 2022 where available, and at the latest by 2025. And that'll be done by either producing on site or off-site that electricity from renewable source, or by purchasing electricity from renewable source. That'll be also a game changer in the potential for electrification of heating, getting rid of the conventional fossil fuel heating technologies. I mentioned embodied carbon, so there's a new section on that as well. So by 2022, the federal government will be reporting, disclosing embodied carbon from structural materials in the major constructions. So mainly looking up at concrete, steel and other structural components. And it will aim at reducing 30% the GHG emissions from those, the embodied carbon from those materials. And we feel that that will help drive the industry toward that direction as well. So really a game changer here. Also, other key components, waste is well covered in terms of construction and demolition. The government will aim at reducing at least by 90% by 2030, and aiming to go to 100% a reduction of or divert waste from construction and demolition. And the last key component for construction, renovations and operations, the federal government will strive to include biodiversity and resilience, climate resilience in its operations. All of this to say that basically there's a paradigm shift that we're facing here. It's we're really now talking with the main focus on carbon. And obviously energy is still a component of our strategy, but really the sole focus now is carbon. And the other game changing, which I mentioned, is basically the focus on longer term. The life cycle discussions and consideration is basically ensuring that we stop making short-term driven decision and we look for the longer term and avoid the pitfalls of implementing technologies that will be there for 25, 30 years. And the fact that we go to carbon neutral and don't aim to go close to carbon neutral, but we aim to get to net zero, forces us to adopt an holistic approach. So no more piecemeal type of approach can be acceptable from now on. Okay, so just give me a second. I'm gonna switch page. I'm still on the Treasury Board webpage, and just want to go over their greenhouse gas inventory to acknowledge that the federal government has already achieved some great success up to now with a reduction of close to 35% of its GHG emissions, which puts the federal government in a good standing for its 2030 objective. But what this table is really interesting about is that I believe 27 federal entities are now reporting and are accountable on their emission reduction objectives. So that's really a great strive. And of those departments, I would say the main ones or the biggest emitters have already either undertaken or completed a carbon neutral portfolio plan, and most of them already also have underway views for carbon neutral buildings or carbon neutral ready buildings. PSPC, being one of the largest custodial department, is also taking its role really seriously. And as a leader, we want also to make sure that the learning curve through the implementation of innovative approach and technologies will also benefit the federal community as a whole. So it's really part of its core purposes to make sure that the federal benefits from the learning that's done at PSPC as well. Looking forward, basically, obviously, the focus will be on high carbon emitters, and that's really a key factor here. Obviously, energy intensity might have a play in some cases, but really what we're looking at is the carbon at this point. And the chronological approach to reduce carbon will basically all be the same, minus some tweaks here and there. So basically the strategy is always to reduce your waste and improve efficiency. And that will be done by different strategy, whether it's from operational improvements, HVAC, mechanical grades, building envelope improvements, getting rid of thermal bridges, improving insulation, air tightness and stuff. And so that really needs to be looked at and addressed in order to enable the fuel switch opportunities. I refer very often to a building in Alberta, for example, for which natural gas prices are really cheap, but electricity is expensive. If you don't tackle the waste reduction and the improvement in efficiencies, the cost is so prohibitive to fuel switch that you might not have the opportunity to do it. So really, there's a sequence of operations. And once you've done the on-site fuel switch, basically the last resort will be through the procurement strategies, looking at procuring clean electricity, renewable natural gas, renewable energy credits and stuff. I want to leave you on this note. Basically, with those stringent targets, we know already that the future that for the federal government, we need to develop comprehensive strategies and implementation plan that will be science-based and that will be data-driven. It's basically the only way for a proper and informed decision-making process, and that's the only way that will result in the best implementation pathway for the Crown, or the best leverage of the money that's available. Also, I must say that basically there'll be no cookie cutter type of implementation. We must take into consideration the energy perspective, at least from a regional perspective, but also the fact that buildings are unique by their age, function. They are in different climate zones. So the solutions that will be developed will need to be done at the regional level, but also at the building level in some cases. And lastly, the last item I want to basically acknowledge is that the real property resources are not unlimited. So funding is definitely a limited resource, and from that, basically public servant will be held responsible for sound management of those funds. So the choices that needs to be made, we are responsible for that. HR resource capacity is also another limitation, and that's why we'll need to rely on the private sector, the proper expertise in the private sector to help us assess, plan, and implement those strategies and initiatives. So it's really what I wanted to leave the audience with before going to the other presenter. And I'm also happy to answer questions that you would have. So Catherine, over to you.
Merci beaucoup Thierry, c'était tellement intéressant. C'est un très bon primer pour s'ouvrir la présentation qui suit, mais aussi ce que j'aime beaucoup de ce que tu as fait ici pour nous, c'est vraiment nous aider à naviguer la stratégie. C'est un peu comme ce qu'on voit dans les live streams avec des gamers où est-ce qu'on les suit, mais là maintenant les gens devraient être capables de trouver l'information qu'il leur faut.
Oui, je voudrais juste rajouter peut-être en finissant, I couldn't spend the whole time, but I would say it's in my favorite web page, and I consult it on a weekly basis. Obviously, I know it, but it's always a good reference to go to.
That's excellent. I love that. Let's, in the interest of time, we've gotten some very good questions from the group. We'll transition to really this point about really helping us move towards data-based decision-making that will help us achieve these targets. And this is where we'll segue to key techs that can speak to methodologies to really better understand performance at the building level of our portfolio, to then help drive initiatives that help us decarbonize really our facilities and our operations. Pavan, I'll pass it over to you, and everyone keep submitting those questions. There will be Q&A time at the end of the session, but also we strive to follow up as well with those questions that might not have been addressed within this webinar. So over to you, Pavan.
Thank you very much, Catherine. My name is Pavan Melati, CEO of Keytech. I want to thank you, everybody, for attending this session. And spending your precious lunch or breakfast time at this point with us. The topic that we want to talk to you about today is energy visibility over building envelopes. Having a very large portfolio of buildings in government sector usually is very hard to make data-driven decisions as far as where is the energy loss or emission, highest emission per section of the building across the portfolio. And we try to, today I will try to explain about a very useful tool to provide the data to the stakeholders, asset managers, property managers, how they can make data-driven decision as far as reduction of carbon emission or energy saving targets that they have. So allow me to start with what is the problem. According to Energy Star report in 2018, up to 51% of energy loss could be through the exterior. We believe that the building envelope, it's a section of the energy loss in the buildings that is greatly neglected for several reasons. Most of our retrofit projects has been so far focused on lighting and also efficiency of the HVAC and other aspects of the building. But the matter of fact is, if the building envelope has leakage and it doesn't perform properly, it doesn't matter how efficient is our heating and cooling system are. We're going to lose energy and also we're going to emit GHG from that building envelope. The other problem that building envelope presents is it's very capex intensive to fix the building envelopes, and that's usually based on the previous policies was neglected because everybody's focused on lower payback time projects and also faster reaction to the imminent problems. Now, with the new greening initiatives from Government of Canada, it's quite important, as Thierry explained, to have a holistic view of the retrofit projects across the building. In other ways, if we fix, let's say, the HVAC emissions or lighting energy in a building without considering the building envelope, and then go after the building envelope, you can have an oversized HVAC system or undersized that will jeopardize the entire energy saving or GHG reduction program that year. So having a holistic view is quite important. And also, we're going to talk about how we can have targeted retrofit projects. And I have today 4 case studies that I will share with you as far as how Keytech tool could help the stakeholders in the vast portfolio buildings that Government of Canada has to achieve their targets as far as reduction of carbon and GHG. I guess 4 pillars of this is data-driven decision, preventing building envelope problems before they arise. So our tool will give you the visibility of over the building envelope and to make a decision before a problem becomes big. Quantifying of energy loss is quite important. We're going to discuss that we can granularly provide you with a tool that you can see where is the emission from a single window or a roof of a building or different building elements. And then cost analysis as well. This part was missing from the building envelope that we are providing in this lunch and learn. So I'm going to briefly explain about the technology and then jump into the case studies and hopefully we have some Q&A after. If you need more information about the technology, I would be happy to explain. How we do it is very cool. We fly a drone around the building. The drone flies by itself. It's an autonomous flight. By law, we need to have our pilots in line of sight of our drones. So before we come to a property, we know a pre-planned flight for our drones that is going to fly around the building and also captures the data points that we want to do. So these are pre-planned. The data points are high resolution images, visual images, and also infrared images. These hundreds, sometimes thousands of images that we take from the building goes through an image processing software. It gets ranked and quantified as far as where is the problematic area and how bad is bad here. At the end, we provide the asset managers and property managers with a final report that has an executive summary of what is the health of the building envelope and also quantification of very granular quantification of what kind of problems we've seen, how much emission was from each section of the building. We separate the heating and cooling element of it so you can clearly go after, as heating usually is with natural gas, going after your carbon reduction targets and what have you. And then all of these data is available on a web portal for you, which I quickly explain here before I go to the case studies. So as far as the technology, the first step for us is we create a complete 3D model of the building. This 3D model is measurable. We can measure every corner of the building within a few centimeters. Reason for that is we need to measure the area of roof, windows, doors, different building elements, and calculate the emission and energy loss from each of these building elements separately. I've talked about the pre-planned flight. This is just a picture for you to see in a complex building like this, which is one of our case studies today. How the drone, these yellow lines are the path of the drone flying up and down, and the points are where we capture the data. And then I mentioned that at the end of the operation, we provide a web portal, all of the data on a web portal. It's very important for people that they have multiple buildings in a portfolio of the buildings. And you could see every corner of the building on a very interactive way on a 3D model of the building. Where's the problematics area, what was the visual images, and also capture the energy loss and also the emission from each section of the building. Technology works, as I mentioned, based on high resolution visual imagery and also infrared imagery. And we do have a very cool AI software in the background that recognize different building elements and also calculates the energy loss from different sections. Now I want to take the time and I'm going to skip my other explanation about the technology, and I want to jump into our case studies. One thing that I want to mention before I go to the case studies, our technology is completely non-intrusive, and we have a big boost during the COVID because it's very hard to get into building. So all the operation that we do is from the outside. And also the speed is quite important for a very large tower, let's say in downtown Toronto. For us, it only take 2 hours to do the entire operation and collect the data. That doesn't mean that the report for it is ready. It takes a bit more time, but this is usually what the property managers are looking as far as the operation. So let's dive into our first case study. This is a 12-story building, a mix of concrete and also glass and IG walls. We did the entire energy audit to this building. So this building, the property manager had a budget of $1 million to go through a retrofit and recladding of the facade of the building. The target was obviously to fix the problems that was structurally on the building, and also the energy and GHG reduction. Now, we did the entire audit for the building envelope, and we measured that the actual energy loss from the envelope annually is about 2,600 megawatt hour per year. And we did another study that if everything in this building was according to the building code in 2017, what would be the energy loss? And that came to 1,600 megawatt. So the opportunity, or negawatt as we call it, the net difference is about 1,000 megawatt hour, which this 1,000 megawatt hour is a mixture of natural gas and electricity. Now, based on the cost for this building, which was about 9 cents per kilowatt, so the opportunity from financial point of view is $92,000. So this is how we can provide them with this opportunity, and also we can zoom in granularly and find the problems in different sections and give them more granular targets. Here you can see on the same building, the developer didn't put any insulation in these walls. And this is where our software will capture different sections of that. And now we want to give a tool. Imagine a portfolio manager that had hundreds of these buildings, and they want to know where they want to put the budget as far as reduction of emission and also energy saving. So we can even zoom in and say from this 10 square meter or 11 square meter, they're losing about 170 watt meter. And does it make sense for them to allocate the budget, and what kind of return are they getting from the carbon reduction and also from energy point saving? The next case study that I want to go through is a large complex. It's a university, is an educational facility with multiple buildings, 400,000 square foot. They have a specific mandate as far as carbon reduction and also net zero, achieving net zero. The building is a mix of concrete and prefab. So we did the entire building. Again, this operation for us was about 4 hours, and it took us about 2 to 3 weeks to analyze the data for these multi-buildings. And very interesting findings that we had in different sections. These buildings are built in different areas, sometimes in 80s, some of them are newer, and we could provide them with very good visibility over the entire portfolio that they have. This university, this was just one of their campus. We've done like multiple campus for them on that, and provide them with the opportunity that, okay, the opportunity on this, the preventative energy loss is about 4,000 megawatt hour and 2,800 metric tons. Now, based on what Thierry showed us on the government website, you can do a calculation of, they can take on, or the building can take on a much longer payback projects, considering the cost of carbon as well. What was our findings? Here you can see some examples of energy loss, which you can't see at the naked eye. We can see what we call energy gushers or energy channels that goes in the different levels of this building. We can find inadequate insulations in a section of the building that translates into energy loss. And sometimes the energy loss could be even more important, because when you have energy loss, there's possibility of moisture penetration. And this was a big concern for the asset manager, that there is a big amount of water basically penetrates in this section of the building. Here's another case study. This is a large office tower, all glass, all IGU walls basically, 1.1 million square foot, 20,000 square meter of IGUs. The cost of changing these IGUs are quite high. So the property manager wanted to have a study to see what is the emission from the IGU walls, which roughly was built in late 70s, this office tower. So we've calculated what is the energy loss total, what is the opportunity. To our surprise, this building built in 70 was performing very well. So it's not always, what I want to say is not always the age of the building that dictates the energy behavior and also emission behavior of the building envelope. It might be a building from a long time ago, but we found some of them are working or behaving thermally very nice. In this case, the avoidable energy emission for this 1.1 million square foot was 2150 metric tons. Now, some of our findings, usually you find in these office towers and glass towers, are low performing IGUs. You can see in this building that the insulating gas between the layer of the windows are gone, and you can even see which one is gone, or the low performing IGUs on another section of the building that the insulation around the windows are gone. And this gives a very good idea of how they can attack this, how they can allocate their scarce resource, which is budget, to targeted energy reduction or carbon reduction projects. Next case study is a 2 million square foot industrial building. This is a production facility, which usually in a production facility, the building is the last thing that the property manager considers. But we showed them that there is a big opportunity here in fixing the building envelope and also reduction of carbon here. So the building is a mix of bricks, concrete, and prefab here, and some IGUs, windows, and garage doors. We showed that the avoidable energy loss, or the negawatt in this case, is about 424 megawatt hour per year, and 300 metric tons of GHG per year. So that's the opportunity. Now I'll share with you some of our findings, which is quite interesting. The same suspect. You have energy loss in these garage doors and the energy gushers that we usually have. Here, the boiler room of the production facility, we find leakage underneath that could be quite important for them. Lots of energy were lost through that section. And also the walls, we find areas in the walls that didn't have adequate insulation. Now I want to give you an example of what we talked about, targeted retrofit and payback calculation. So generally, the reason that this retrofit programs were neglected before is always we were talking about the payback time and consider the payback time on building envelope very long. But this is actually a part of a federal building, and we anonymize data because of the privacy of data. But here, just two building elements, the walls and also windows and doors, and approximately the same cost of fix, which is about 100K. One is applying insulation in a section of wall, and the other one is changing windows and doors on a section of same building. You can see that the payback time is significantly different. So we want to make sure that you have this tool to make data-driven decisions on that. And then what Thierry was explaining, and I think is quite important, is in our payback time, we have to consider the non-energy benefits as far as like carbon reduction, and also the avoided replacement cost as far as how we do our calculations. Another section which is quite important is about new builds and also the retrofit program. So we usually get involved in reducing commissioning and after retrofit assessments. In this case, you can see a retrofitted building belonging to a local government here in Ontario that we found quite a lot of problems after the retrofit problem and a lot of energy loss that was not calculated basically on the target that they had for net zero. And the last one, that last slide that we have is the same commissioning. One government section decided to change all of their garage door to this acrylic type of garage doors, and we found that from energy point of view, these new doors are much worse than the old doors, and this could be a case of not achieving your target, although you're spending the money on changing the building elements. And that concludes my presentation. Back to you, Catherine.
Thank you very much, Fayvan. Oh, I just feel for those facility managers with that finding that, oh gosh, the goal of retrofitting something with, maybe an anticipation of savings or energy reductions, and then not realizing that goal. Yes, like really warrants, I think, the merits of doing kind of detailed reviews after some of our major projects. We've gotten some really great questions for the audience, because I did note that something interesting was you brought up was, I think, performance that you saw in the different kind of building stock that you've assessed, both heritage buildings and maybe newer constructions, really kind of stuck on the point that it seemed like even what we might call heritage assets, older facilities, we might not necessarily see lower poor energy performance in those buildings, correct?
Absolutely, absolutely. In one study that we did in December last year, two buildings that was exactly the same design by one architect. One was built 10 years ago, one was built last year, basically. And we looked at the same design, and the building from 10 years ago was performing much better than the new building. And the reason is the way that was built, and also the material that was used that was not according to the design. So that's very important, not to always think that because the building is new, it will perform much better.
Really? Yeah, no, it's a good bias to be aware of. Something else that was neat in terms of, you're sharing this imagery. Got a question from the audience here regarding the infrared cameras that you're using and kind of that technology. How does that technology really quantify for factors like outside air temperature or the impact of sunlight on the building when you're kind of doing these assessments?
That's a very good question. So usually the signature or thermal signature of sun goes away after 3 to 4 hours. So our operation usually happens 3 to 4 hours after sun down, usually between 10, 11 p.m. until 5 a.m. That's where we do our imagery as far as the infrared, and the visual would be during the day, obviously, with the full light.
Excellent. I think I might just bring in Thierry back into the room, because I think we got another question for the audience that might be, maybe you can answer, Thierry. It's regarding becoming net zero. Are carbon offsets part of the greening a government strategy?
That's a very good question. Actually, the concept of net zero at some point recognize that it's probably not possible, or it's certainly not possible for the federal government operation to not emit any emissions at all. Operations involve the operation of buildings, so consumption of electricity, and in some cases, I remember seeing a question on heritage buildings. Obviously, energy use intensity of those buildings with more limited type of solutions will result in a building in the end that will still have high energy use intensity and obviously achieving zero carbon emission from that building will involve at some point the more procurement. I mentioned the sequence of activities in the strategy. Basically, once you've reduced as much as you can and you've considered the fuel switch internally, you look into procurements and obviously those obvious ones are clean electricity to power the building and renewable natural gas when it's not possible to electrify heating. And so that's what will be looked at definitely. As far as RECs and offsets, those are in categories that becomes more tricky and with more, I would say, not reluctance, but more careful implementation, or it wouldn't give a government of Canada wouldn't give a green light to everything because we think it's the best way. There'll be needs for demonstration that it cannot be achieved in any other way or possible ways forward. And again, I don't want to speak for Treasury Board here. I'm just acknowledging that some of the achievements to be made are sometimes very difficult and sometimes impossible to reduce at the source, and for such, so other solutions will need to be found.
Thank you. Yeah, do not speak for Treasury Board. Let's see how far we can get before having to get to offsets. Thank you for that. Really, to remind us of like there's so much we can still probably do as real property managers when it comes to the facilities and our operations. We got other questions. I'll bring it back to Pivan because I find we doing analysis condition assessments, we always get great information and knowledge about our portfolio, our facilities, and that translates to data. And what's been your experience in terms of, and your approach to sharing data with your clients, whether it's kind of does it easily integrate into BIM modeling, for instance, which is something that we're kind of seeing more of within the facilities space? How have you seen your clients kind of use it if it is kind of integrating into BIM?
Absolutely. So very good question. So some of our clients that are doing energy modeling of the entire building, basically, a good portion of it is again the building elements. And what so far has been used is assumptions as far as what they're supposed to be and what should be the deterioration based on some mathematical calculations. What we offer them is the actual measurements of what is the effective thermal resistance of the different surface of the building, and they can plug this into their overall energy modeling of the building. That's another service that we provide with to more sophisticated customers.
That's great. So people can probably test the impacts of different initiatives on the overall building performance or behavior, so to speak.
Correct.
Excellent. One other thing I wanted to check in about the data is if it's provided in a point cloud model, is a question we received from someone from the audience, because it's great that it'll get used in BIM, but we know there's other tools out there used within the real property community to help analyze building performance and inform designs. Have you seen it kind of used in other places than BIM?
Yeah, the data is offering on a cloud-based portal, and we went through a lot of working with federal government. Obviously, we went through a lot of precautions as far as privacy and hosting the cloud in Canada and all of the restrictions that is available is for that. We haven't worked with other tools that government is using, so I'm not familiar with those, Catherine, but our platform is open and we can easily make plugins to any other platform to transfer the data, basically.
Yeah, really good to have that flexibility so that different individuals can really dig into the data for their own uses. One thing I wanted to see, I don't know if this is something that the group here can answer, but we got a question from the audience regarding the impact of COVID-related issues with fresh air circulation and how that then impacts energy performance.
Well, during the COVID, this thing was a big deal as far as how much fresh air comes into the building, and obviously changes all the equations that was around that. But when, and there was a question that you mentioned before as well, if the body of the building has a true opening, like a window open or a hole into the envelope, then it's very hard to quantify that. Obviously, you have to know the air pressures. But most of the case, you see the impression of those air loss basically on the surface of the building. That is quite quantifiable and easy for us to do.
Very neat. Would you add to that, Thierry, on this topic of fresh air intake for COVID?
Yeah, well, definitely, Pavan. I think your intervention was very good in terms of the impact on the building envelope. Looking at it from a tenants or occupants perspective is also really tricky. From our internal experience at PSPC, obviously the occupation rate was very different during COVID than it was pre-COVID. So depending on the building geometry, its function, and basically the internal gains that we see, the impact on the energy has been anywhere from minor to a bit more substantive, but nothing dramatic. So, and I wouldn't want to advance myself on precise numbers, but I would say it was not that significant.
Fair enough. Well, thank you both very much for participating. I think we'll just for us, but what an engaging discussion and really interesting topics that you shared with us today. Danny?
Yeah, I totally echo that, Catherine. What a fantastic session today, and it is such a relevant topic. So thank you so much to our incredible speakers, Pavan and Thierry. Thanks also to Catherine for moderating this fantastic session today. Thanks to all the RPIC volunteers for supporting this event, and thank you to Keytech for making it happen, making this Lunch and Learn happen today. And of course, to our generous annual sponsors, our public sector sustaining partner, PSPC, our private sector sustaining partners, Colliers Project Leaders, Tyree Facility Solutions, and Horizon Inc., and to our private sector supporting partner, AECOM, and our public sector supporting partner, Canada Lands Company. Along with the theme of greening government, RPIC will be hosting another free webinar on April 27th, titled How the Energy as a Service Model Helped to Fund Canada's First Carbon Neutral School. So definitely keep an eye out for the details on that coming soon. Thank you all for attending and being a part of the conversation. We encourage you to visit the RPIC website to get some more information on upcoming events. And thanks to all of you for being a part of RPIC, and we will see you soon. Take care, everyone.